In the world of Teyvat, there are two kinds of people: those who passionately yearned to be swept into the cosmic ballots of the Archon War,
Yet I am deeply disappointed that I was never allowed the fortuity to personally participate in the Archon War.
and those who don't.
All those losses were meaningless, driven by the demands of the laws. There's no point in bringing it up again.
Shut up, you gigantic pussy. The Archon War is an interesting topic because despite it lasting for well over a millennia, a minimum of 1700 years in fact, very little is actually known about it, which is weird when you consider the fact that it went on for as long as it did and no one seemed to go, is this worth it? The most important questions obviously are, how did it start and was it necessary? Our current understanding is that one day 7 divine thrones opened up in Celestia and the gods swiftly fought each other in an elongated conflict to decide who would claim them. It seems like the seats were reserved for the gods alone, given that Venti had to become a god to claim their respective throne. Which I'm not really sure why. It may have been a power thing, but there are beings nowadays who are stronger than some gods. Hell, I'm sure some of the Adepti were stronger than some of the gods, and had they not been loyal to Rex Lapis, could have taken some out in their own pursuit of power. But this current understanding is lacking, to say the least. While I don't doubt Soroya, I'm sure her name is lovely dear, is correct in saying that the war was fought over the thrones, how are the gods in Teyvat even made aware of this fact? You know, you might be surprised to learn that in Teyvat it's been implied that there is racism among the gods. There appears to be 2 different groups of gods who have always been and those who ascended to become gods. And when speaking about Vanessa who ascended to become a god after death, Dainsleif said this, quote, "It ultimately does not but hover under the light of the gods." It being Vanessa because she's a bird now. Imagine living a great life, you know, ascending, you're going to become excited, new powers, you're going to lead a group of people just to come back as an ostrich. Ain't that a bitch? Anyway, how deep does the god hierarchy go? Because for instance, Vanessa died and became a god, so I suppose she's the lowest form of a god, which I'm assuming is why they turned her into a fucking pigeon. And I'd guess next up are people like Venti, who became a god while still living through sheer accumulation of power. And then maybe A and Makoto, who so far as we know have just always been gods. And finally, people like Rex Lapis and King Desherat, who are described as having descended unto Teyvat. Regardless, the whole point I was trying to make is, how did the gods become aware of the start of the Archon War? Do they all have unrestricted access to Celestia and just happen to see 7 thrones open up in Celestia? Or did Celestia just announce that 7 seats are up for grabs and just tell all the gods to fight for them? None of these really sound super convincing when you take into account Nahida stating that the war was necessitated by the laws of Teyvat. Given we don't know the laws, it's tough to say what really happened. Also, I don't get Nahida's claim. I'll play it again just so there's no confusion.
All those losses were meaningless, driven by the demands of the laws. There's no point in bringing it up again.
Is she saying the losses were driven by the laws, or the war was? Well, yes, obviously with war comes losses, but I've often heard the idea that the Archon War served an ulterior motive, separate from placing gods among the thrones, which was to purge out the god race as a whole to a more controllable amount. This is certainly an interesting theory for a number of different reasons. It implies that for some reason Celestia may have viewed the gods as a threat. This also reinforces the idea that the Archons are nothing but puppets in the grand scheme of things. However, many gods remained after the conclusion of the Archon War. They simply fled to the Dark Seat, where it seems like most of them ended up dying for reasons not yet known. My other problem with this theory, and more so just a general question, is the process by which some gods became Archons. For instance, Venti didn't really fight anyone for the sole purpose of becoming the Anemo Archon. He fought Decarobian simply because Decarobian was a bad ruler, and then became the Anemo Archon. Hell, Andreas didn't even fight, he just sort of rolled over thinking he was unfit to become an Archon. Rex Lapis, on the other hand, did kill many gods during the Archon War, but it's not like he went out seeking conflict. He fought to protect Liyue, purging evil gods from the area. Quite literally, the only thing we know about Ei and Makoto during the Archon War is that Urabashi couldn't defeat them, and that's it. Sumeru is interesting because it seemed like instead of fighting, all 3 gods that lived there lived in harmony with one another during this time. There was King Desherat, Lord of the Sands, Nabu Milikada, the goddess of flowers, and then Greater Lord Rukkhadevata, the god of wisdom. Together, they were known as the god kings of Sumeru. Interestingly, it seemed like King Desherat was either offered a seat by Celestia or simply didn't care to fight for it, with the Flower of Paradise Lost set writing, quote, "Through King Desherat's words and aspirations, she saw the possibility to to transcend the absurd shackles that govern this world. Rejecting the gift granted by the divine throne, the red-crowned king sought a new path of his own volition. King Deseret was never really a fan of the divine and sought forbidden knowledge to try and fight against them, which wound up in both him and Nabu Malakata dying, leaving Rukkhadevata all alone to claim the throne, I guess? I don't know, she didn't seem to fight anyone for it. Fontaine makes even less sense, as it's literally just Egeria both became a god and the Hydro Archon because of human desires? Apparently, Fontaine's Windglider states, humans desire judgment because they feel guilty. Humans want, and so they want to give things up. Humans always desire a god. That is why the Primordial Sea's heart's gentle Egeria was awarded a shard of that who was first and gained both an Archon's right and the divine duty come lately. Was this the desires of humanity having reached the heavens, or was it merely the opening act of a dark string of plots? Why did no one fight her for it? I don't get it. She can't have been the strongest. Were there really no warmongering gods actively seeking the thrill of battle and wishing to become the strongest by claiming the throne? I suppose if that description fits any Archon, however, it'd be the god of war, but even the original Pyro Archon is no longer with us. Putting all that aside for now, the ultimate question is why the Archon War even needed to happen. I'm curious how long after the creation of the Gnosis this war took place, because if it was soon after the war, then this makes complete sense. However, if a considerable amount of time passed, then I'm not really sure what's going on. And based on King Deseret knowing nothing of the Celia race and the Moon Sisters, I'd be willing to bet that it's the latter. Which essentially leaves us with very little information regarding the reasons for the Archon War. It cannot simply be that Celestia, out of the kindness of their hearts, decided to grant an insane amount of power to 7 gods, especially if their goal was to try and reduce the god race as a whole. There must have been a reason, be it ensuring the new order of this world is kept or otherwise. Personally, I think it might have something to do with the absence of Celestia on the affairs of Teyvat ever since the war with the Second Who Came. Yesterday we spoke about how Celestia was once extremely hands-on with humanity, but following the battle with the Second Who Came, they all but vanished from Teyvat, only really showing up to mete out punishment. If there was a reason for this they couldn't control, I don't know, the Master of the Heavens becoming severely weakened thanks to forbidden knowledge, it could be the position of the Archon and the Gnosis are reminders of all that Celestia still controls everything in Teyvat, even if they aren't interacting with them as much.
The heavenly principles have been silent for many years, but the Gnosis are symbols of their control over Teyvat and all the laws.
However, this relies on what Celestia has been doing since the Archon War, and honestly, the only thing we know they've done since then is blast Conria. There's about a 1500-year gap following the Archon War, of which we know very little about what Celestia was doing. It could be they were simply silent for most of it, like they are right now, or they did something in the 2 nations we haven't visited yet. The only notable thing I can think of, off the top of my head, is when Celestia got angry at Egeria for using the Primordial Sea to alter life. In any case, given information about things that actually matter is few and far between in these games, I'm sure we'll get more info on the Archon War in, conservative guess, about 37 years.